And just thinking of, this a private group for the things that I can't openly talk about from my own work on the public channel without getting banned right away. And this one gives us at least a reprieve for some unknown time. These are people that want to transform their own lives and not just listen as entertainment, And not that there aren't any serious people in the general public audience, but this is more concentrated. So I thought, what would be fun to share with them behind the scenes that we may not have gotten a chance to get into that much during the show, that is interesting to you, that if you're just, sitting around after some kind of event and you get to talk about what's important to you. What about, you want to say something about ET experience or something that you didn't get into about health, or what would you like to look at?
Well, if it's the kind of stuff that comes up when we're sitting around a campfire.
Yeah, I mean, this is a non-censored platform, so you can pretty much say anything you want to.
Yeah, usually that kind of stuff. Usually people ask me about the ET stuff for sure. Okay. And that is something that, first of all, one of the things that I encounter even with like my own staff sometimes. I really don't think they believe me when I tell them.
Right.
But
they don't want to be offensive.
They've seen so many other bizarre things, the way things manifest in my life, they kind of have to wonder. But
right.
Sometimes, and they acknowledge it, but I kind of wonder if they really believe it or not sometimes. Because I understand, believe me, even when somebody tells me they have ET contact, I listen very carefully to what they say about their experience, because I've met people who were MK Ultra mind controlled, who were programmed, and they were just saying that stuff to spread disinformation.
Right.
And
right.
So I am skeptical when somebody else says it, but you can usually tell right away with a conversation with somebody that has, because there's a lot of telltale signs. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I've seen is there are way more people having physical and non-physical contact with extraterrestrial, interdimensional beings than people would believe, particularly scientists and politicians, people in positions of power, and people in positions who have technological knowledge and knowledge of science and mathematics that can influence the well-being of the planet. For example, it didn't surprise me one bit when March of 2018, Nassim Haramein finally came out and admitted that he was having ET contact. I could tell right away he was having ET contact from the stuff that he was talking about the nature of the universe, and the geometric nature of the universe and that kind of stuff, because some of it was stuff that I had been told by ETs that I'd never heard anybody else say. And then also the kinds of things that I was told by different types of ETs, I could tell. Like I can tell sometimes Pleiadian technology from reptilian technology or whatever. And so sometimes there are telltale signs like that. So, personally, I've bumped into a lot of people, scientists, engineers, inventors, sometimes people in the NSA or working for the NSA, and people running supplement companies that have had ET contact or are having ET contact, and they absolutely would never admit it publicly because it would destroy their credentials, or they're afraid of, being ridiculed or whatever, or having their business disrupted, which are all valid concerns, because believe me, when I came out in 2011, I thought long and hard about it before I did it. Red Ice Radio had asked me to come out and talk about it. And I figured at the time, I thought, well, the Red Ice Radio audience is not that big, and it's probably not going to spread to other places, so I'll talk about it there. But man, that opened up a can of worms, because then all kinds of other people started asking me to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it hurt my business quite a lot. People didn't want to do business with me.
That is so weird. I mean, from my point of view, it's like, the normal attitude to me is like, you just want to know about everything. So why would people get upset with you for knowing about something they don't?
Well, it wasn't that they got upset. Like, there's a person who's a very, very prominent natural health advocate, who's very famous, makes a lot of money, and is very credentialed, and he has used my technologies. He's a big believer in them. I've spent hours talking to him about all of this stuff, and he believes it, and he knows it's true.
Yeah.
But he told me, he said, I can't bring this kind of stuff up. I can't interview you. He can't even interview me about the skater stuff, because he said in his realm, because of his background, he would be so heavily attacked by the medical establishment and other status quo institutions that it would destroy him. I mean, he's the kind of person that gets attacked for recommending chiropractic.
Wow.
And so to be talking about ETs or scalar energy technology, even though he uses it and believes in it,
he's dealing with a really conventional group of people, I guess. Huh?
Exactly. It's like Dr. Oz. If you went, and it's not Dr. Oz, but let's say I met Dr. Oz and we got to be friends, and he heard all this stuff and believed it.
Yeah.
He ain't going to talk about it on his TV show.
No, that would be his last show. Sure.
He would lose every sponsor he had, and he wouldn't have a show anymore. So, so it's that kind of stuff. It's the more mainstream somebody is, and the broader appeal they have, the less likely they're going to be to interview me or talk to me about this stuff. And that's fine. I understand that. But yeah, it has meant that it's been difficult to maintain a business even now, because even though I've got a fairly good presence on the internet, YouTube and Google, for example, have been actively suppressing me and my content in their search results since last January, really heavily.
Right.
And whereas it used to be like if you went to YouTube and searched on Ken Rohla, it would autocomplete a bunch of different topics. It doesn't do that anymore. Same thing with Google. Or, like if you start typing the title of one of my videos in YouTube, it no longer auto-completes. Kind of stuff. Yeah. And then they've been actively unsubscribing people from my channel. My YouTube channel subscriptions were growing faster than my email list. And now it's actually gone down and is going negative. So those are the kinds of things. It makes it tough to make a living. Whereas, with the knowledge I have, I could just go off and do something non-controversial and be rich.
I know.
So that, I guess that's one of the kind of the little tidbits that I would say average people don't really get about a lot of people who are doing good for the planet, is the struggles that they have going on behind the scenes, and possibly ET contact going on with them. Sometimes people will, depending on their backgrounds, like I've met people who had very Christian backgrounds that would say Jesus is telling them or whatever, when it's really some kind of non-physical interdimensional being. But there's a lot of that going on. It's the norm. It's this interaction with other dimensions and other non-physical beings and physical beings sometimes has been going on this planet for as long as people have been here. It's a normal part of the way the universe works. It's just been dismissed and poo-pooed by the powers that be, so that we believe that it's rare and that only very few people that it's happening to. But anybody can do this, and this is why I actually put out a video. And I don't think it made it to YouTube, but it was. I did it at a conference, and it was recorded. But it was a video about. No, I know it was at ECETI last July, and I don't know if it's on YouTube or not. But I did a video about how to improve your chances of having ET contact.
What's the basics of it?
Well, the basics are, number one, intention, because it's like, how do you do anything? It's through intention starting out. It's like, how do you become wealthy? Well, you got to learn how to become wealthy. So you put your focus on it and you start learning about practically how to do it. And so there's, that. It's like there are people having regular ET contact. There are people like Dr. Stephen Greer or ECETI who are, they will host events where people come and get together, and they'll have UFO sightings, and sometimes people will see extraterrestrials and interdimensionals showing up there. Like when I was at ECETI on July 4th weekend, and for those people that are interested, their website is eceti.org. I believe it's .org, might be .com. But they have these gatherings all the time where they're having UFO sightings there all the time, every night. And some of it is very, very vivid, visually to the naked eye, and some of it you can see with infrared binoculars or telescopes. So they've got all these different kinds of ways of seeing what's going on there. And then sometimes like apparitions will just appear. Sometimes Bigfoot will appear. They've got apparently a family of Bigfeet that live around this property. It's way out in the wilderness. And the county actually has an ordinance that makes it illegal to hunt Bigfoot. So people see Bigfoot out there all the time. When I was there, 3 different people saw Bigfoot.
And they almost never get eaten or anything, right?
No. As a matter of fact, because the people there are not afraid of them and they will communicate telepathically with them, so they've had positive interactions with them. And one lady, as a matter of fact, said that she was out walking and she just said, "Bigfoot, I love you." Right. And something came up behind her and kicked her knees out from underneath her. And she looked around and there was nothing there. But the guy who owns the property said, "Oh, that's Bigfoot. They've got a teenager Bigfoot that likes to do that to people if it's not somebody who's right. a person." And then other people have just seen them. And there's actually a video on either Netflix or Amazon Video where a guy went up into Canada, way up in the wilderness, and he spent weeks there just filming. He found a place where there were Bigfoot, and he filmed it. And so he's got a lot of footage of big feet, young and old, looking at him through the trees, not too far away. Very, very clear video.
Is there anywhere you can see that video?
Yeah, and I don't remember the name of it, but I would think if you would search on Bigfoot on either Amazon Video or maybe Netflix. I think it was Amazon Video, but it might have been Netflix. Just search on Bigfoot and see if you can pull it up. I don't remember the name of it, but he was just this guy he was a serious researcher, and he had a background in science, and he went up there and camped out for weeks and weeks, and he would communicate telepathically. And he said at first they tried to run him off and scare him, making all kinds of noises and scary noises, tearing things up. But eventually they realized he wasn't a threat, and then they kind of warmed up to him. And that's what the people at ECETI say. They say that if you go out there with the intention of meeting one, you probably won't. But if you go out there just with the intention of sending good vibes to them and that kind of stuff, you may encounter them. And he said they're very, very psychic. They're interdimensional. They can appear and disappear. And that was confirmed by a guy named John Vivanco, who is a remote viewer who has a company that does remote viewing professionally. And these guys are no flakes. They do remote viewing for big corporations and governments and military and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And he said they remote viewed the Bigfoot on the ECETI property. And he said that there was a whole family of them, and that they're interdimensional and that they can do all these things, and they're very psychic, and so they can communicate telepathically with you and all kinds of stuff. Wow. So yeah, there's a lot of cool experiences you can have like that, even if you've never had any kind of anything like that before. If you start seeking that stuff out, you'll find it, and then you can go and have these experiences, and sometimes it just happens serendipitously.
If they're really highly psychic, that would ideally mean that you could actually contact them from anywhere. Right. You wouldn't necessarily have to be in the forest.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody out there isn't channeling Bigfoot.
Yeah, the thing with the channelers is you have to distinguish between the ones that are channeling their own mind and the ones that are channeling somebody else.
Exactly. In my experience, most of them are channeling their higher self or something else. They're not really channeling what they say they're channeling.
Something in their mind, but they could be totally sincere.
Yeah. And even, like years ago when I used to go to Barbara Marciniak's channelings, you could feel the energy coming off of her. It was very, very powerful, and it would change your life just getting exposed to it. But even she, over time, she stopped channeling that energy, and she started channeling her higher self because she couldn't hold the frequency. Right. And of course she would refute that, but that's my opinion. Yeah. And other people's opinions. It's like, even when you are really channeling what you may think you're channeling, it can change.
Exactly. Yeah, so this is a constant effort that you don't just do once in a while. You have to be working on your own consciousness all the time, huh?
And your own physical body, too. If you're channeling other frequencies, it can fry your nervous system and mess you up physically. That's what happened to Jane Roberts, for example, who channeled all the Seth books. She was smoking, she wasn't taking care of her health, right? And then she's channeling all this energy that was just frying her.
Isn't it interesting that so many of these people separate what they consider spiritual and physical, and they just say, who cares what happens on the physical level?
Yeah, and Jane Roberts she was channeling back in the 60s and 70s, and nobody knew about this stuff much. I mean, channelers have been around as long as people have been around, but in modern American society, it was really her and a few other people back in the 60s and 70s that were kind of at the forefront of the channeling phenomenon in the U.S. And so they just didn't know much about it. They were learning as they went.
Yeah.
Because, for example, Barbara Marciniak told me that when she went and visited Jane Roberts on her deathbed, and she said Jane looked like she was an 80-year-old woman. She was in her either late 40s or early 50s. Mm-hmm. So then Barbara, and she did a lot of work to maintain her health so that she wouldn't get fried channeling the energy that she channeled.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And you said that the guru in India was the same way, that he was doing both physical body stuff and higher dimensional things at the same time.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when I first heard about Yogi Raj, Guru Nath Siddhanath, I was doing a talk up in North Carolina in the mountains it was at a little intentional community. And when I got done, this lady came up and said, hey, I'm hosting this yoga retreat. I think you might be interested in. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, no, I wouldn't be. Because all of the yoga courses that I had taken, it was just exercise classes. And the people didn't know the real power of yoga. And it just, I'd fall asleep at the back of the room by the end of the class. And so I thought, no, I'm not interested in that. But then she said, well, the yogi that teaches this method, he's got and I had been talking about Ormus in my talk. She said, he's got a 5-foot tall orb of monoatomic mercury in his ashram that he uses to heal people. And I said, well, first of all, if you had a 5-foot tall chunk of monoatomic anything, it would kill you if you got within 100 yards of it, because it would create such a huge superconducting field. The electrical potential from it would be like shooting out lightning bolts and wanting to ground with all kinds of stuff. Right. And she said, yes, that's right, but he uses his mind to make it safe. And I said, well, if that's true, then I got to meet this guy, because he tamed it. Huh? Yeah, that would take an incredibly powerful being. Yeah. And so ultimately, I did wind up hosting a yoga retreat at my house where some of his teachers that he had trained came and taught, and Yogi Raj projected himself energetically to that retreat at one point. And of course, I could feel it and I could see him in my mind's eye, but he selectively made some of the people, there was a group of 40 people in my living room. Mm-hmm. And, in my living room, we don't have any flowers or anything in my living room, but like 5 or 6 people scattered around in the audience suddenly, when he came in, smelled the smell of flowers, really, really beautiful, strong smell of flowers. Yeah. And I was like, it was overwhelming. I'm like, whoa, and I looked around and my wife smelled it, and I'm looking around and there were like just a handful of people scattered around this audience smelling this smell, and nobody next to them was smelling it, and so this guy, I've met other people that have seen him walk on water and bilocate, but be in 2 places at the same time when they're looking at him in both places, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So this comes from purifying the body, purifying the mind, and then ingesting Ormus in its natural forms and its alchemical forms. But you got to be able to handle all that stuff. You can't just slam it into you. Is this guy on YouTube or anything like that where you could see him? He is. As I mentioned, his website is siddhanath. Let me check it out and see if it's org. It's either org or com. I think it's. Okay. I think it's .org. siddhanath.org. Yeah, .org. Okay. So you can see him there, and he's all over YouTube. He's got tons of videos on YouTube. And what's his whole name? It's Yogi Raj, Yogiraj. Yeah. Siddhanath, Siddhanath. Gurunath, Gurunath. And he is from the same guru lineage, I believe, is Paramahansa Yogananda, and it's the Siddhanath lineage, like the yogi that wrote the autobiography of a yogi and all those most powerful ones. Let's put it that way. He's the most powerful yogi I've ever encountered. Actually, he's the most powerful being I've ever encountered, next to maybe these reptilians. Right. I mean, the guy is almost a deity. He's physical and he's a person and he's very normal, but he can do things, supernatural kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, Siddha means supernatural power. Yeah.
So it's interesting that he's called that.
Yeah. Yeah. He's that. He's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
But very down to earth, very grounded. And that's one of the things I like. You know, I avoided yogis and Indian mysticism and mysticism in general for many years, because when I was, you know, in my teens and 20s, I saw friends that were getting into it and they were giving their power away. My master said this, my master said that.
I know.
You know, and it's like, I didn't want to be like that.
I saw that firsthand in India for a long time.
And those are the yogis and the masters that aren't true masters. The true masters are the ones that give you information and knowledge to empower yourself and not be dependent on them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, so many of those, you know, not the same level of Indian masters. They teach that everything is them. You're nothing. You're never going to develop into anything without them just saving and helping you. And so, you know, give up whatever you think or feel and just do whatever they say.
Yeah, and ultimately you'll see those yogis self-destruct too. You know, like the millionaire yogi and these other yogis that are all into materialism. And there's nothing wrong with making money and wealth, but when your focus, you know, when you've got like 26 Rolls Royces and your focus is on making money off your spiritual teachings, and you're trying to make people dependent on you, you're not a real yogi and you're not a real master.
Yeah, and not all of them do it for money. There's some that are really sincere, and that's what they learned, and they're transmitting it to you. And they believe that nobody is anything without their guru, and that the guru does everything for you. And they just really believe that. And I've seen some believe it until they die. It's
which these
these
yogis that I'm looking at, and these gurus, they don't do that. They give you knowledge and information to empower you so that you can have the experience that they had that empowered them.
Yeah, and I think their physical death is different too, if they're at a certain level.
Very much so.
That can be smooth transition.
Yeah, my mother-in-law, who's dead now, she was Buddhist, and she would meditate in her later years after she was retired in her 70s and 80s. She would meditate about 12 hours a day. And her goal was to attain enlightenment and understanding so that she would not be caught in the reincarnational cycle of the earth after she died. Right. And I think she achieved it, because my wife and I don't hear from her non-physically anymore. Right. But she showed us video of a yogi, or I don't know if you call him a yogi or some kind of master. He was a Buddhist master in China that was burned. His body was burned on a funeral pyre. And you could see an image of him sitting in the lotus position in the smoke very clearly when his body is being burned. Right. And then he reportedly would come back and make things happen around the ashram, you know, change things, physically change objects and things. And of course he came to people all the time, but and then there's stories of, you know, people like Padmasambhava, who was they call him the second Buddha, who reportedly could fly, not just fly from here, you know, across the yard, but he could fly from one country to another, and he would take groups of dozens of people and fly them from one country to another and all kinds of crazy stuff, push his hand and stone and feet into rocks and leave an impression in the rocks. And stuff. And there's, you know, evidence of that, supposedly. So you hear these stories and they seem too fantastical for Western minds to believe. But when you go there and you see these real masters doing these supernatural things, and you understand about superconductivity and Ormus and those kinds of things, and you start using these things and see what it can do for yourself, then these stories become more believable.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully all this leads up to the one superpower that we're really interested in, which is how do you change the intention and the heart of the malicious rulers of the world. I'd like to see that siddha be done.
Yeah, that's the big trick.
Possible.
That's the big trick. And you never know how it can happen, but it can happen because, you know, a lot of these Indian politicians now are students of these masters, and who knows what other politicians may be behind the scenes, or people in the CIA or the NSA or whatever. Yeah. You know, I mean, like if you look at that movie that's on Netflix, Men Who Stare at Goats,
Right.
You got military people who were studying with these yogis and gurus. And so if you really, for example, let's say you wanted to enlighten President Trump or whoever,
right.
and you know these, if you've done these techniques yourself, you can't just like be some neophyte and think that, you don't have your shit together and you want to get Trump together.
Yeah.
You got to get your act together first and get more enlightened yourself.
The correct sequence.
Right. But through these techniques, you can intend that, and maybe even with a group of people in, group meditation and prayer to have an influence on these people.
You know what I think has a lot to do with it is at a deep level below what you're aware of, where your real beliefs are that control your life, not the ones you think you believe. When the parts of that tell you what's impossible are dropped, I think that other things can happen.
Well, you also find out what you really believe when your life is threatened.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, for example, years ago, I got exposed to rabies. I saved a dog that was infected with rabies and got its blood on me, and I had an open wound and it infected me. And at that time, I knew none of the stuff that I know now about natural health, and I was agonizing about what to do about it because I didn't want to take the shots and everything.
You're right.
And I called up my friend who had worked with Gabriel Cousins, and I asked her what I should do, and she said, well, do you think that it's your time to die? She didn't give me any herbals, this or that and the other. She said, do you think it's your time to die? And I said, no, I don't. She said, then heal it. I was like, oh, shit, I don't know what that means. So I got off the phone with her. And this was in the early days of the internet. This is probably like 1993. So there was no Google. The search engine was Alta Vista, and it sucked.
I remember that. You
remember that? And I spent 4 days searching and searching and searching for natural cures for rabies. Right. And the bad thing about rabies, see, is that not only can it kill you and make you go insane along the way, but you could treat it and think you got rid of it, and then it can pop up 10 years later and kill you. Mm-hmm. So you have to be really, really, really certain that what you're going to do is going to work. And so, so after 4 days of searching, I finally found just a little mention somewhere on an obscure website that the Lakota Indians had used echinacea to cure rabies. Mm. And as soon as I saw that, I knew that it was a big spirit trick, because I had hired somebody a few months earlier to plant a garden, an herb garden right outside of my front door, and it had tons of echinacea in it. Mm. And so I started eating and juicing echinacea like it was going out of style. Huh. And after 3 weeks, I went and got tested, and guess what? No rabies. Yeah. But it was a test that I created, in conjunction with the universe, I guess you would say, right, to see if I was really going to do what I believed in. And I think there was probably some ET involvement as well, because I think that I know that these ETs, time is not linear for them, so they can see past and present, and they don't necessarily can see the future, but they can see the probabilities. Yeah, and they probably also knew about karmic agreements that I had before I came into this life. So I think it was kind of a setup to test me, because I had many tests, by the way, after that. I had many tests testing my character and testing to see how I react to different situations and things in various ways, sometimes in the dream state, sometimes in the waking state, and to see if I would live what I was thinking and believing. Yeah. And it's not easy. It's not easy. So that was, it's like when your life is on the line, then you know what you really believe. Right.
Well, I think, in our last couple of minutes, what about just saying something about why you need to do both the non-physical and physical, and the mistake of saying, well, I'll just be spiritual and physical body doesn't matter. How do you put those together, and why?
Well, because you have a physical vehicle just like a car, and it's like if you take care of a car and maintain it and change the oil often and keep the filters clean and all that, it's going to last a hell of a lot longer than not. And so from that standpoint, your physical vehicle is going to last longer if you take care of it. But also too, if you walk around with a body that's clogged up, if your meridians are clogged up and you're toxic, your liver is toxic, then you're going to be more angry and judgmental. You're not going to be happy, number one. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be as perceptive and as psychic and as intuitive and as empathic and as loving, because your body and your meridians and your energy structures are clogged up, and you're just not going to be happy. Yeah. It's like the whole reason of doing this stuff isn't necessary to live to be 100 years old. Right. It's to be happy. The Dalai Lama had a great thing. Somebody asked him, what's the meaning of life? And he said, the meaning of life is to be happy.
Yeah.
And it's a great response. It's like, why do we do anything we do?
But that's a deeper answer than it sounds like.
Right.
It's like, not just ignore everything so you'll feel good or something.
Exactly. Why do people take pharmaceutical antidepressants? Because they want to be happy.
Yeah.
They just don't know how to get there.
Exactly.
And so, the thing to do is to look at people who are happy and who are healthy and who are uplifted and uplifting, and find out what they're doing and do what they're doing. And we've already got them out there. There's tons of great teachers that are teaching this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So you can go as far as you want.
Yeah. So your physical vehicle, in my experience, just on a practical side, it's like if you want to heal a disease, you've got to work on the physical as well as the non-physical. I've met people who have cured like brain cancer in a few hours just by working on the mind. I've met people who have physically restructured bones in their body and gotten rid of a major trauma, physical trauma, just with their minds. Right. But those are the very rare occasions where they had very special circumstances that may or may not be repeated by somebody else depending on their belief system. Yeah. Because it takes a combination of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind lining up and believing firmly that it can be done. Yeah. Otherwise, it won't happen. Yeah. And so if there's even a shadow of a doubt, it won't happen.
Heard of a person regrowing an arm that way.
Yeah, but and I've met people regrowing organs.
It's not the basic level place to start.
Yeah, so it can be done, but most people don't have the consciousness to do that. So for most of us, you're going to have to do the physical stuff along with the mental, emotional, spiritual stuff.
Right. Enjoy the steps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, neat. Hold on, and we'll say goodbye in the next break here. And thanks for sharing that stuff with us.
Oh, my pleasure.